The desert wind howled like a distant wolf, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and regret across the cracked asphalt of Route 17. It was just past midnight when the old pickup truck sputtered to a halt on the shoulder, its headlights flickering like dying stars. Inside, 8-year-old Sophia huddled in the back seat, her small hands clutching a frayed stuffed rabbit, its ears limp from too many tear-soaked nights. Her mother, Emily, gripped the steering wheel, her face pale under the dashboard glow, whispering frantic prayers into the phone that had just gone dead. "We're out of gas and no one's coming," she said, voice breaking. "Sophia, stay close. Something's wrong. I can feel it." The isolation hit like a punch. They'd been driving for hours, fleeing a life that had turned sour in the city, debts piling up, shadows from Emily's past knocking at the door. Now, stranded in the vast emptiness of the Nevada Badlands, the night pressed in. Sophia peered out the window, her wide eyes catching the silhouette of distant mesas under a sliver of moon. A low rumble grew on the horizon. Not thunder, but engines. Deep, throaty, like the growl of awakened beasts. Headlights pierced the dark, a single beam at first, then a pair, weaving closer until it resolved into a lone motorcycle cutting through the dust. The biker pulled up 10 feet from the truck, his machine idling with a steady purr that vibrated through the ground. He was a broad-shouldered figure in weathered leather, the kind that spoke of miles logged and battles unspoken. His helmet stayed on, visor down, but as he killed the engine and swung a leg over, Sophia caught a glimpse of his arm, bare under the rolled sleeve of his jacket. There, just above the wrist, a faint, irregular mark, a crescent moon intertwined with a thorny vine, the skin around it scarred as if from an old burn. Her breath caught. She pulled up her own sleeve, heart pounding, revealing the identical shape on her inner arm, a birthmark she'd always hidden like a secret shame. It was the same, exactly the same. Ethan, though she didn't know his name yet, removed his helmet, revealing a face etched with lines from sun and sorrow. Mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair cropped short and eyes the color of storm clouds. He scanned the scene with the quiet vigilance of a man who'd seen too many breakdowns, literal and otherwise. He carried the weight of forgotten oaths in his posture, the subtle limp from a shrapnel wound earned in a desert half a world away. 20 years ago, he'd promised a young medic under fire that he'd look out for her kin if the worst happened. She'd slipped him a photo, a tiny handprint with that mark, before the explosion took her. He'd buried the memory with her dog tags, riding solo ever since, chasing horizons to outrun the ghosts. "You folks all right?" Ethan's voice was gravelly, laced with the drawl of forgotten heartlands. He approached slowly, hands visible, no threat in his stance. Emily tensed, shielding Sophia, but the girl's curiosity won out. She leaned forward, staring at his arm. That's like mine," she whispered, loud enough for him to hear. Ethan froze, his gaze dropping to her exposed skin. The world narrowed, the wind hushed, the engine ticks faded. Recognition hit him like a rogue wave, crashing through the barriers he'd built. This wasn't coincidence. It was the pull of a promise long dormant, rising from the ashes of loss. Emily explained in halting words, the empty tank, the dead phone, the fear of being found by men from her old life, creditors with fists heavier than their threats. Ethan nodded, listening without judgment, his mind racing back to that medic, Sarah, who'd bandaged his wounds and shared stories of a baby on the way. "Hold on," he'd told her in the chaos. "I'll make sure they're safe." But life had scattered him. Divorce, the club he'd half joined then left. Endless roads. Now, here was the mark, living proof. He siphoned enough gas from his own tank to get them moving. But as Emily turned the key, another rumble swelled. Not alone anymore, Ethan had called in the cavalry. From the south, a convoy emerged, 30 bikes, Lights like fireflies in formation, the Iron Vow MC crest gleaming on their vests. These weren't outlaws. They were brothers bound by codes older than the highways. Veterans, mechanics, men who'd traded war zones for open throttle, honoring debts unpaid. Ethan mounted up, signaling the lead rider, a burly figure named Marcus, with a prosthetic hand from the same campaign. "Ride with us to the next town," Ethan said to Emily, his tone leaving no room for debate. "Safe house there, no questions." Sophia watched from the truck window as the bikers formed a protective ring, engines revving in unison, a thunderous vow against the night. For the first time in years, Ethan felt the old fire stir, the one that said promises weren't just words, they were lifelines. As they rolled out, dust swirling in their wake, the girl in the back seat pressed her rabbit to the glass, the birthmark tingling like a key turning in a long-locked door. The convoy cut through the pre-dawn chill, headlights carving paths through the dark. Ethan rode point, the wind whipping at his jacket, carrying whispers of what might come. Sarah's face haunted him, her laugh in the tent, the way she traced that mark on her own arm, saying it was luck, a talisman. If this child was hers, or kin to her, then the shadows chasing Emily weren't random. Corruption festered in the city they'd fled, a web of officials turning blind eyes to the vulnerable, pocketing bribes, while families like this one shattered. Ethan had walked away from that fight once, after his own family crumbled. Wife gone, son estranged over the scars of his service. But now the mark bound him. Redemption wasn't a destination. It was this ride, this choice to stand. By the time the sun crested the horizon, painting the desert in hues of gold and crimson, they'd reached the outskirts of El Dorado Springs, a dusty town with a single motel that doubled as sanctuary for wanderers. The bikers peeled off into a loose perimeter, watching for tails. Ethan helped unload their meager bags, his eyes meeting Sophia's. "That mark," he said softly, crouching to her level. "It means something to you?" She nodded, voice small but steady. "Mom says it's from my dad. He left before I was born, said it'd keep me safe." Ethan's throat tightened. Safe. That's what he'd sworn to deliver. As Emily settled into the room, exhaustion claiming her, Ethan stepped outside, lighting a cigarette under the motel's flickering sign. Marcus joined him, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "You see a ghost out there, brother?" Ethan exhaled smoke into the warming air. Worse, a second chance. The convoy's engines idled nearby, a symphony of loyalty ready for whatever storm brewed. In the distance, the city lights beckoned like a trap. But Ethan knew this promise would drag him back, unraveling secrets that could redeem or destroy. For the girl with the matching mark and the family he'd chosen on two wheels, the ride had just begun. The motel room smelled of stale coffee and faded dreams, the kind that clung to the thin curtains like smoke from a long-extinguished fire. Emily collapsed onto the sagging bed, her body finally surrendering to the night's toll, while Sophia curled up beside her, the stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin like a shield. Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the parking lot where the Iron Vow bikers had dispersed into watchful pairs, their machines parked like silent sentinels under the sparse shade of a dying Palo Verde tree. Ethan leaned against the motel's peeling wall, the cigarette burning down to a stub between his fingers, its ember glowing like a tiny accusation. Marcus stood beside him, his prosthetic hand flexing unconsciously, a reminder of the IED that had claimed it in a sun-baked valley overseas. The big man had ridden with Ethan since those early days after the service, when the club formed not for thrills, but for survival, a brotherhood forged in the fires of unspoken grief. "Second chance, huh?" Marcus rumbled, his voice low to avoid carrying. "That girl's got you twisted up like a bad chain. What's the play?" Ethan flicked the butt away, grinding it under his boot heel. The desert heat was building, waves shimmering off the asphalt, turning the horizon into a mirage. "Sarah," he said simply, the name tasting like dust on his tongue. It had been 20 years since the medic's laugh cut through the chaos of their outpost, her hand steady as she stitched his wounds. She'd shown him the mark on her arm one night, under the dim lantern light, tracing its curves with a finger calloused from scalpels and sand. Family heirloom, she'd joked, but her eyes held a deeper story, of a life waiting back home, a child not yet born. When the blast came, ripping through their tent, Ethan had pulled her from the rubble too late. Her last words gasped amid the sirens. "Promise me, watch for them. The mark." He'd nodded, blood-smeared and broken, but the war scattered him after that. Hospitals, discharges, the endless pull of the road. Now that mark lived on Sophia's skin, an echo that demanded reckoning. "If she's connected," Ethan continued, glancing toward the room's window where a curtain twitched, "then whatever's chasing Emily isn't just debt collectors. Sarah's old unit had ties to some shady ops, officials who buried reports, took kickbacks to look the other way. Could be they're tying up loose ends." Marcus nodded, his gaze scanning the empty road leading into town. El Dorado Springs was a forgotten speck, population barely scraping 1,000, with a diner that served greasy plates and a sheriff's office more interested in speeding tickets than real trouble. But trouble had a way of finding the lost, like vultures circling carrion. "Club's got your back," he said. 20 riders stayed behind, the rest are scouting the flanks. We ride as one." Inside, Sophia stirred, her eyes fluttering open to the unfamiliar hum of the air conditioner rattling like loose gravel. Emily was still asleep, her face softened in repose, but the girl slipped from the bed, padding barefoot to the door. She cracked it open, peering out at Ethan, who straightened at the sight of her. The birthmark peeked from her sleeve again, a silent question mark in the morning light. "You hungry?" Ethan asked, keeping his voice even, like approaching a skittish colt. She nodded, stepping out fully, the rabbit dangling from one hand. They walked to the diner's edge, a weathered building with a neon sign buzzing "Open" in fractured red. Inside, the air was thick with the sizzle of bacon and the murmur of locals nursing mugs of black coffee. A waitress named Grace, mid-50s, with laugh lines etched deep and a no-nonsense bun, poured them plates without a word, her eyes flicking curiously over the biker's vest. As Sophia picked at her eggs, Ethan watched her, the pieces shifting in his mind. "Your mom. She ever talk about where that mark comes from?" he ventured, casual as stirring sugar into his cup. Sophia shrugged, her small fork scraping the plate. "Just Dad. He was a soldier," she says, "went away before I could remember. But sometimes, at night, she looks at it and cries, says it's a promise he made." Her words hung there, simple and sharp, cutting through the diner's chatter like a knife through fog. Ethan's chest tightened, the echo of Sarah's voice, promising safety to a child she'd never hold. If Sophia was her daughter or niece, the threads pulled taut. Emily's flight from the city, the men with heavy fists. It wasn't random, it was erasure, a quiet corruption where the powerful silenced the weak to protect their ledgers. Back at the motel, Emily woke with a start, the phone in her hand, borrowed from Grace, ringing shrill. She answered, her face draining of color as a voice on the other end hissed threats. "We know where you are. Pay up, or the girl pays." She dropped the receiver, hands shaking, and rushed outside just as Ethan and Sophia returned. "They're coming," she whispered, eyes wild. "The ones from the city. They own half the officials there. Twist laws like pretzels to get what they want." Ethan's jaw set, the old fire flaring. He pulled out his own burner phone, barking coordinates to Marcus, who revved his bike in response. The convoy reformed swiftly, engines coughing to life, a low roar building like an approaching storm. "We don't run," Ethan told Emily, helping her and Sophia into the truck, now fueled and ready. "We face it, that mark, it's not just ink, it's a vow." As they pulled out, the bikers flanking them in a steel embrace. The desert stretched endless ahead. Sophia pressed her hand to the window, the birthmark catching the sun, a beacon in the dust. Ethan rode beside, wind tearing at his resolve, knowing the road led back to the city's underbelly, where secrets festered like open wounds. Redemption wasn't clean, it was gritty, forged in the heat of choices made under pressure. For the girl who'd unlocked his past, and the brothers who'd never let him ride alone, the promise ignited, burning away the shadows, 1 mile at a time. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from, and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments they reach you. The asphalt blurred beneath the tires as the convoy pushed north, the desert giving way to scrubland, dotted with Joshua trees that clawed at the sky like forgotten prayers. Ethan rode shotgun in the pickup's cab, his bike trailered behind one of the club's rigs, to keep the formation tight. Sophia sat between him and Emily, her small frame rigid, eyes fixed on the horizon, where the city's sprawl loomed like a concrete mirage. The birthmark on her arm itched under the sleeve she'd hastily pulled down, a secret now shared that felt both liberating and heavy, like carrying an extra helmet on a long haul. Emily's hands trembled on the wheel, knuckles white against the cracked leather. "They'll trace the phone call," she murmured, voice barely audible over the rumble of engines flanking them. "The men from the city. They're not just collectors. They work for bigger fish, ones who bend rules in boardrooms and back alleys. If they find us—" She trailed off, glancing at Sophia, who clutched the stuffed rabbit tighter. Ethan placed a steady hand on the dash, his gaze steady on the road ahead. He'd seen corruption like this before, in war zones where aid meant payoffs and loyalty was bought with silence. Sarah had whispered about it once, patching a wound while dodging questions from higher-ups who'd profited from the chaos. "Keep your promises close," she'd said. "They're all you've got when the system's rotten." The lead bikes, Marcus at the front, his prosthetic gleaming in the sun, signaled a slowdown as they approached a narrow pass, the kind where ambushes hid in the folds of rock. Dust devils swirled in their wake, painting the air with a gritty haze that stung the eyes and coated the throat. Ethan scanned the rear view, spotting 2 tail riders peeling off to check for shadows. The Iron Vow wasn't about flash, they were a shield. Men who'd traded fatigues for leathers, binding wounds with wrenches instead of bandages. Jonathan, a wiry veteran with a scar across his jaw from a stateside brawl, rode drag, his eyes sharp as he watched for any glint of metal that wasn't theirs. Sophia's voice broke the tension, small but insistent. "Why do you have the same mark? Are you like my dad?" She looked up at Ethan, her eyes wide pools of unspoken questions. He hesitated, the words sticking like sand in gears. How to explain a battlefield vow to a child who'd only known highways and hideouts? "It's a sign," he said finally, choosing truth wrapped in simplicity. "From someone important. She saved my life once, and I promised to watch out for folks like you if trouble came knocking. Looks like trouble found its way." Emily shot him a sidelong glance, a mix of gratitude and wariness. In the hours since the motel, fragments had spilled out. Her own ties to Sarah, a distant cousin who'd vanished overseas, leaving behind whispers of a child and a mark passed down like a family legend. Emily had fled the city after collectors turned violent, smashing windows and leaving notes that promised worse if debts from a bad investment weren't cleared. But Ethan sensed deeper rot, officials who'd greenlit the harassment, twisting protections into nooses for the desperate. It mirrored the scandal Sarah had hinted at, where reports of missing personnel vanished into filing cabinets lined with bribes. The convoy crested the pass, the city unfolding below like a beast stirring from slumber, towers of glass and steel piercing the smog, streets veined with traffic that pulsed like blood. Marcus's voice crackled over the radio, clipped to Ethan's vest. "Eyes open, brothers. We're entering the Lion's Den, safe house on the east side, old warehouse by the tracks. No stops till then." The engines throbbed in response, a chorus of defiance against the urban sprawl. Sophia leaned forward, pressing her nose to the glass, the rabbit forgotten in her lap. For a moment, wonder flickered in her eyes. The city wasn't just threat. It was lights and motion, a world beyond the endless road. But the peace shattered as sirens wailed in the distance, not close but closing, blue lights flashing like warnings on a faulty dash. Emily's foot eased off the gas, panic etching her face. "That's them. They must have tipped off the locals." Ethan grabbed the radio. "Flank and feint. Jonathan, take the truck alternate route. Alley off 5th. We'll draw the heat." The formation split with practiced precision. Half the bikes surged ahead, engines roaring to mask the pickup's peel-off, while Marcus led a decoy charge toward the main drag. Ethan stayed with Emily, his hand on her shoulder. "Breathe. We've got routes they can't predict. This club's navigated worse than city cops on payroll." As they veered into the industrial underbelly, warehouses hulking like rusted giants, rails overgrown with weeds, the sirens faded, swallowed by the maze. Sophia's breathing steadied, but her hand found Ethan's sleeve, fingers brushing the birthmark there. It was a tether, pulling at threads of memory. Sarah's final gasp, the photo clutched in her fist, a tiny outline matching this one. If Sophia was that legacy, then the chase wasn't just financial. It was erasure, silencing echoes of the past to protect the present's sins. Ethan had run from his own ghosts after the war, his son's accusing stare, the wife's goodbye note blaming the miles and the nightmares. But running ended here, in this labyrinth of steel and shadow. The safe house emerged, a nondescript brick building by the freight yards, its windows boarded, but for slits that watched the world. Marcus and the decoys rolled in minutes later, unscathed. The sirens, a distant echo. Inside, the air was cool and musty, lit by bare bulbs that swung like pendulums. The club gathered in the main room, folding chairs around a scarred table, maps unrolled like battle plans. Jonathan poured coffee from a dented pot, his scar twisting as he grinned. "Heat's off for now, but they'll circle back." Emily sank into a chair, Sophia climbing into her lap, while Ethan paced, the mark on his arm a burning reminder. "We need answers," he said, voice low. "Emily, who exactly are these men? Names, connections, anything tying back to Sarah's old unit?" She nodded wearily, beginning to unravel the knot. A network of ex-officials, now in private security, burying scandals from the war for profit. Sarah had stumbled on it, documents hinting at covered losses, including her own. The birthmark, a family sigil perhaps from a line of soldiers who'd served quietly, their honor untainted. As night fell, the city hummed outside, trains groaning like weary travelers. Ethan stepped onto the loading dock, the air thick with the scent of oil and rain-threatened dust. Marcus joined him, lighting a smoke. "This promise of yours, it's pulling us deep, brother, but if it's family—" Ethan nodded, staring at the stars peeking through the urban haze. Family chosen, not born. That's what the vow stood for. For Sophia's wide-eyed trust, Emily's fragile hope, he'd ride into the heart of it. The mark wasn't just skin, it was a call to arms, a quiet revolution against the corrupt tide. And as the first drops fell, pattering on the tin roof, Ethan knew the storm was just gathering force. Rain lashed the warehouse roof in relentless sheets, turning the loading dock into a slick mirror that reflected the city's fractured neon glow. Ethan stood there unmoving, letting the downpour soak through his jacket, the cold seeping into his bones like an old wound reopening. The scent of wet asphalt mingled with the metallic tang of the rails nearby, a gritty perfume that grounded him amid the swirl of revelations. Marcus had retreated inside, but Ethan lingered, his mind replaying Emily's words like a scratched reel. The network of ex-officials, shadows from Sarah's era, now cloaked in suits and security badges, erasing traces of their wartime sins. The birthmark wasn't just a link, it was a flare in the dark, signaling unfinished business. Inside, the safe house hummed with low voices and the clink of mugs on the scarred table. Sophia had dozed off in a corner cot, her chest rising and falling in the dim light from a single bulb, the stuffed rabbit guarding her dreams. Emily sat across from Jonathan, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the wood, perhaps the shape of that mark, now a shared talisman. The wiry biker leaned back, his scar catching the light like a silver thread, listening as she pieced together more fragments. "Sarah was my cousin," Emily admitted, voice hushed against the rain's drumbeat. "She wrote once before the end about a baby, said if anything happened, the mark would find its way to family. I never knew. But when Sophia was born with it, I thought it was coincidence, until the troubles started." Jonathan nodded, his eyes sharp, the kind honed from years spotting lies in foxholes. "Coincidence in this world? Nah, that's how they operate. Bury the truth under layers of maybe. But we've got roots, contacts. One of our own, Lucas. Runs a garage downtown. Ex-military intel. He can dig without tripping alarms." The club had layers like an onion, peeling back to reveal networks built on trust, not transactions. Lucas was a quiet type, mid-30s, with a perpetual grease stain on his cheek and a mind like a filing cabinet, pulling strings from the shadows. Ethan pushed through the door, water streaming from his hair, shaking off like a dog after a swim. The room fell quiet, all eyes on him, the weight of expectation settling like dew on leather. He stripped off his jacket, hanging it on a hook by the door, the iron vow patch dripping onto the concrete floor. "We move at first light," he said, voice steady as the rumble outside. "Emily, you and the girl stay here with a guard rotation. Jonathan, link up with Lucas. I need names, real ones from that network. If they're tying Sarah's disappearance to this, we expose it." His gaze flicked to Sophia, sleeping soundly, oblivious to the storm brewing beyond the walls. That innocence fueled him, a quiet fire against the corruption that preyed on the vulnerable. As the night deepened, the group dispersed into shifts, some to bunks in the back, others to perches overlooking the yards where trains hissed steam into the rain. Ethan couldn't sleep, pacing the main room until Emily joined him, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders like armor. The air between them crackled with unspoken questions, the patter of rain a backdrop to her soft words. "Why help us? Strangers on a road. You could have kept riding." He met her eyes, storm grey like his own, seeing echoes of Sarah there, the same determined set to the jaw, the quiet strength. "That mark," he replied, rolling up his sleeve to reveal it fully, the crescent and vine stark against his skin. "It's not just a scar. Sarah inked it on me one night after patching me up, said it was her luck, her promise to come home, when she didn't. I carried it like a debt." Emily's breath caught, her hand hovering near her arm before pulling back. "She was like a sister to me growing up. Sent money when things got tight, after Sophia's dad bailed. He was no soldier, just a drifter who saw the mark and spun tales. But the real danger? It started when I asked questions about Sarah's records. Officials stonewalled, then the collectors showed up, like they'd been waiting. The pieces aligned in Ethan's mind, a cover-up spanning decades, wartime losses hushed for reputations and profits, families like Emily's caught in the crossfire. It wasn't justice served in courtrooms. It was the kind bought with silence, leaving marks deeper than skin. Dawn crept in grey and sodden, the rain easing to a drizzle that beaded on the windows like tears. The convoy stirred, engines coughing awake in the yard, a low growl that vibrated through the floorboards. Marcus clapped Ethan on the back as they geared up, his prosthetic clicking softly. "Ride smart, brother. This city's got teeth." Ethan nodded, strapping on his helmet, the visor fogging briefly from his breath. He glanced back at the safe house door, where Sophia stood, rubbing sleep from her eyes, Emily's hand on her shoulder. "We'll be back before dark," he called, the promise simple, binding. They split into pairs, Ethan with Jonathan toward the garage, Marcus scouting the flanks. The streets were slick, puddles mirroring the overcast sky, the city awakening with horns and the squeal of buses. Lucas's place was tucked in a side alley off the industrial strip, a squat building with bays open to the wet air, tools gleaming under fluorescent strips. The man himself emerged from the shadows, wiping hands on a rag, his build lean and unassuming, eyes alert behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Heard you had a ghost ride in," Lucas said, voice neutral as he shook hands. No greetings wasted. They dove into it, Emily's details sketched on a notepad, connections traced like wiring diagrams, hours blurred in the dim shop, coffee steaming in mugs amid the smell of oil and solder. Lucas pulled threads, old unit rosters, redacted files from public archives, whispers from veteran networks. Names surfaced: Victor Hale, a former liaison-turned-consultant, his firm handling security for city contracts. Elena Croft, a records clerk with a trail of expunged reports. "Hale's the linchpin," Lucas murmured, tapping a photo on his screen. The man's smile slick as patent leather. "Tied to ops where Sarah served. If she saw something, mismanaged funds, lost personnel, he'd bury it. And that mark could be a flag for anyone digging family lines." Ethan's fist clenched on the workbench, the birthmark pulsing like a heartbeat. It wasn't vengeance he sought. It was truth, the kind that freed legacies from shadows. As midday sun pierced the clouds, casting shafts through the bay doors, Jonathan's radio buzzed. Trouble at the safe house. A black SUV circling too close, plates untraceable. "They're probing," Jonathan said, urgency edging his tone. Ethan grabbed his keys, the engine's roar summoning him back to the road. The promise pulled tighter, a vine wrapping around his resolve, leading straight into the heart of the beast. The ride back was a blur of spray and urgency, tires cutting through standing water, the city a gauntlet of red lights and wary glances. Marcus met them at the warehouse perimeter, his bike idling like a coiled spring. "False alarm, scouts, not strikers, but they're closing the net." Inside, Sophia ran to Ethan, her arms wrapping around his leg, the rabbit trailing behind. In that moment, amid the tension, he saw it. Not just a child's trust, but the family forging itself, link by mark, by mile. The corruption loomed, but so did their stand, quiet, unyielding, a vow against the tide. If this chapter stirred something in you, please hit that like button below. Your support fuels these tales of honor and heart, keeping the road open for more. The warehouse air hung heavy with the scent of damp concrete and machine oil, the drizzle outside tapering to a persistent mist that fogged the high windows like breath on glass. Ethan knelt to Sophia's level, his rough hand gentle on her shoulder, the warmth of her embrace cutting through the chill that had settled in his chest during the ride back. Her eyes, bright and unscarred by the world's sharper edges, searched his face for reassurance, the stuffed rabbit's floppy ears brushing his knee. "You came back," she whispered, as if testing the words against the uncertainty swirling around them. Emily watched from the doorway, arms crossed tight, her expression a mix of relief and the ever-present shadow of fear. Marcus cleared his throat, breaking the moment, his bulk filling the frame of the loading bay door. Scouts were just testing the waters. Black SUV, tinted windows, no plates. They looped around and vanished into the industrial sprawl. But Jonathan's right. The net's tightening. Lucas texted, Hale's firm has eyes everywhere, from traffic cams to low-level badges on the take. The bikers gathered in a loose semicircle, their leathers creaking softly, faces lit by the harsh glow of a portable lantern. Jonathan leaned against a stack of crates, his scar pulling taut as he nodded, while Lucas joined via a crackling speakerphone from his garage, his voice a steady anchor in the storm. Ethan rose slowly, the birthmark on his arm a faint throb under the rolled sleeve, like a compass needle pointing toward unfinished oaths. He paced the scarred floor, boots echoing in the vast space, the rain's patter a distant underscore to his thoughts. Sarah's memory flickered, her steady hands in the field tent, the way she'd etched that mark on him with a makeshift needle and ink scavenged from rations, turning pain into purpose. "We don't wait for them to strike," he said, stopping to face the group. "Lucas, what else you got on Hale?" Emily mentioned records, Sarah's, maybe others from the unit. The line hummed, then Lucas's reply came crisp. Dug deeper. Hale was logistics lead during her deployment. Reports show discrepancies, supplies unaccounted for, personnel listed as transferred but never resurfaced. Sarah filed a query weeks before the blast. It got buried, and so did she. If Emily's questions stirred that pot, they're not just after debt, they're silencing echoes. Emily stepped forward, her voice gaining steel amid the vulnerability. It started small, calls about overdue payments on a loan I shouldn't have taken. But when I pushed back, mentioning Sarah's name to a clerk for old benefits, things escalated. Windows broken, notes left. Stop digging. They know about the mark somehow, called Sophia the heirloom in one threat. The word hung in the air, twisting like the vine in the birthmark's design. Sophia huddled closer to her mother, but her gaze stayed on Ethan, a quiet alliance forming in the space between them. The Iron Vow men exchanged glances, their loyalty a tangible force, forged not in blood, but in the shared weight of promises kept against all odds. As evening deepened, the city outside pulsed with life, distant horns blaring like warnings. Freight trains rumbling past with a metallic groan that vibrated through the walls. The group planned in hushed tones, rotations tightened, scouts dispatched to Hale's office downtown, a nondescript tower of glass that masked its underbelly of deals. Jonathan volunteered for the night watch, his wiry frame slipping into the shadows like smoke, while Marcus organized supplies, canned goods, extra fuel cans, a medkit restocked with the quiet efficiency of men who'd patched more than engines. Ethan found a moment alone with Emily in the back room, where cots lined the walls like soldiers at rest. Sophia slept nearby, her breathing even, the rabbit rising and falling with her chest. "You holding up?" Ethan asked, leaning against the doorframe, the dim light casting long shadows across his face. Emily nodded, but her eyes betrayed the cracks. Nights of running, the isolation of single motherhood laced with ghosts. "That mark on you. It's like seeing Sarah again. She always said it was a protector, passed down from our grandmother, a nurse in another war. If Hale's crew is connected, they're not just corrupt. They're thieves of legacies." Ethan's response was a low rumble, drawn from depths he'd long sealed. "I lost my own family to this life, the roads, the scars. Son hasn't spoken to me in years, blames the absences. But Sarah's promise, it kept me from breaking entirely. Now it's yours too." Their hands met briefly, not in romance but in solidarity, a bridge across losses, the air thick with the unspoken vow to shield what remained. Night fully claimed the warehouse, the mist turning to fog that muffled the world's edges. Ethan took first shift on the roof, a flat expanse overlooking the yards, his breath visible in the cooling air. The city lights twinkled mockingly, Hale's tower a distant spike piercing the skyline. Below, the convoy's bikes stood ready, chrome dulled by moisture, engines silent but primed. A flicker caught his eye, a shadow moving too deliberately along the tracks, not a vagrant but purposeful, cloaked in dark gear. Heart quickening, Ethan keyed his radio. Perimeter breach, east side. Jonathan, circle around. The response was immediate. Boots on gravel, the soft rev of a bike starting low. The intruder paused, head turning as if sensing the net, then bolted toward a chain-link fence. Jonathan cut him off, tackling with a grunt that echoed up to the roof. Marcus and another rider, Ryan, a stocky mechanic with a healer's touch from his paramedic days, flanked in, securing the man without excess force. They dragged him inside, zip ties biting into wrists, his face obscured by a ski mask that Marcus yanked free. Mid-40s, slick hair, eyes darting like a cornered animal. One of Hale's low-rung enforcers by the cheap suit under the jacket. "Talk!" Ethan demanded, looming in the lantern light, the birthmark exposed like a badge of intent. The man spat defiance at first, but under the steady pressure of questions, names, routes, the mark's mention, cracks formed. Hale knows about the girl, says she's a loose end from old files, wants her quiet, permanent. The confession ignited the room, Emily's face paling as she clutched Sophia awake, the child stirring with wide eyes. But in that fear, resolve hardened. Lucas patched in again. "Got a lead. Hale's meeting tomorrow at a club downtown. Neutral ground, but we can tail." Ethan nodded, the pieces aligning like gears in a well-oiled machine. This wasn't blind rage, it was measured justice, the kind that exposed rot without becoming it. As the captive was bound in a back closet, guarded by Ryan's watchful gaze, the group settled into the night's vigil. Sophia, now fully alert, slipped her hand into Ethan's, her small fingers tracing the mark on his arm. "It keeps us safe," she said, voice a whisper of faith. He squeezed back, the touch a lifeline amid the gathering storm. Dawn approached stealthily, the fog lifting to reveal a city stirring under grey skies, the air crisp with the promise of confrontation. Ethan watched from the roof as the first light gilded the rails, knowing the ride ahead would test every bond, the chosen family of the vow, the legacy of a mark, the unyielding pull of honor against corruption's tide. Promises weren't fragile, they were the engine driving them forward, one determined mile at a time. The first rays of dawn sliced through the fog like hesitant blades, painting the warehouse roof in muted golds and greys, the mist curling away to reveal the city's jagged silhouette. Ethan descended the ladder with deliberate steps, his boots scraping the rusted metal, the echo lost in the low murmur of engines warming below. The air carried the sharp bite of wet earth and diesel, a reminder that the night's revelations had shifted the ground beneath them. Inside, the group huddled around the scarred table, maps creased and coffee mugs steaming, their faces etched with the quiet resolve of men who'd stared down worse than a single confession. The captive enforcer slumped in the corner, wrists bound, his earlier bravado evaporated into sullen silence under Ryan's unblinking watch. Emily paced near the cots, Sophia clinging to her side, the girl's eyes heavy-lidded but alert, the stuffed rabbit a soft barrier against the tension. "He said permanent," Emily whispered, her voice threading the air like frayed wire. "They're not stopping at threats anymore." Ethan met her gaze, the birthmark on his arm a subtle pulse under the lantern's glow, echoing Sarah's final plea amid the rubble. Protect the mark, the legacy. He'd carried that weight across continents and counties, letting it fade into scar tissue until this child's identical shape reignited it. Now it bound them all, a silent oath against the shadows Hale's network cast. Marcus unfolded a fresh printout from Lucas, the paper crinkling like dry leaves. Meeting set for noon at the Anchor Club, downtown dive, neutral turf for backroom deals. Hale's slimy, but he plays by codes. No guns inside, handshakes over threats. We tail, not storm. Jonathan and Ryan on the bikes outside. I'll go in with Ethan, blend as patrons. The plan wove through the room like smoke, precise and unyielding, the iron vow's way, action born of loyalty, not impulse. Jonathan nodded, his scar a pale slash in the morning light, filtering through cracks in the boards. "I'll ghost the alley. If it sours, we signal and extract clean." No one mentioned the risks. Hale's reach extended to badges and informants, twisting justice into a noose for those who pried too deep. Sophia tugged at Ethan's sleeve, her small hand warm against the leather. "Are you going to fight them?" Her question hung simple and piercing, cutting through the tactical murmur like a child's truth amid adult schemes. Ethan crouched, leveling his eyes with hers, the scent of her shampoo, faint lavender from the motel soap, mingling with the warehouse's oil tang. "Not fight," he said softly, his gravelly drawl steady as an idling engine. "We uncover what they've hidden. That mark on your arm, it's stronger than their secrets. It brought us here, and it'll see us through." She traced it with a finger, the crescent and vine mirroring his, a bridge across generations and griefs. In her trust, Ethan glimpsed redemption's edge, not erasing his failures, the son lost to resentment or the wife's farewell etched in memory, but mending what Sarah's promise demanded. Emily knelt beside them, drawing Sophia close, her own arm brushing Ethan's in a fleeting solidarity. The air thickened with unspoken histories, her cousin's letters from the front promising a return that never came, the mark of family thread woven through nurses and soldiers, guardians in quiet wars. Hale's crew had severed it, burying files to shield their graft. Diverted funds, vanished lives, all sanitized for profit. Emily's flight had been the spark, her questions about benefits igniting the hunt, turning a mother and child into targets. "Be careful," she murmured to Ethan, her eyes holding his, a spark of the medic's fire in their depths. He nodded, the vow unspoken but ironclad, the chosen family of the vow expanding to include this fragile pair. By mid-morning, the convoy rolled out in staggered waves, bikes humming through the awakening streets, the mist yielding to a sun that baked the puddles into steam. Ethan rode with Marcus, the wind tearing at his jacket, carrying the faint salt of the nearby bay where the anchor club squatted like a weathered ship. The city unfolded in layers, bustling sidewalks giving way to shadowed alleys, horns blaring like distant thunder. They parked a block off, engines cutting to silence, blending into the foot traffic, construction crews and delivery vans masking their approach. Jonathan and Ryan peeled away to the rear, their machines tucked behind dumpsters, eyes scanning for tails. The anchor's interior hit like a time capsule, dim wood paneling scarred by decades, the air thick with cigar smoke and the low clink of glasses. A jukebox crooned old blues, its notes weaving through the murmur of patrons, dock workers nursing beers, a few suits like Hale's type lurking in booths. Ethan and Marcus claimed a corner table, ordering black coffee that arrived bitter and scalding, their vests unpatched to avoid drawing eyes. Noon struck and Hale entered, tall, polished, his smile a veneer over shark teeth, flanked by two shadows in tailored wool. They settled at the bar, voices low, but Ethan's ears, tuned by years of listening for sniper whispers, caught fragments. Loose end. The girl's file. Clean it up before inquiries. Marcus's foot tapped a subtle code under the table. Alert. Ethan's pulse steadied, the birthmark a cool anchor against his skin. This wasn't chaos, it was precision. The moral stand against institutional rot. Hale's laugh cut sharp, sealing a deal with a handshake, but as he turned to leave, his gaze snagged on Ethan, a flicker of recognition. No, just wariness. The suits exited first, Hale lingering to light a cigarette, the flame illuminating a face etched with the hollowness of buried sins. Outside the signal flashed, Jonathan's bike revving once, short and sharp, The tale began, subtle, weaving through traffic, Hale's sleek sedan, cutting toward the towers. Ethan radioed the safe house. "On the move! Hold tight!" The chase pulled them deeper into the urban vein, engines thrumming with purpose, the promise propelling them. Sarah's echo rode with him, her mark a beacon against the gathering dark. Justice not in fists, but in the unmasking of truths long concealed. As the sedan vanished into a garage beneath Hale's building, Ethan knew the confrontation loomed. Not a blaze, but a steady burn, forging redemption from the ashes of forgotten oaths. The afternoon sun hung heavy, casting long shadows across the glass facade of Hale's tower, a monolith of mirrored windows that reflected the city's indifferent sprawl. Ethan idled his bike across the street, helmet visor down, blending with the lunch-hour rush of suits and cabs. Marcus had circled to the service entrance. Jonathan perched on a rooftop overlook with binoculars, his voice a crackle in Ethan's earpiece. "Targets ascending. Top floor private office. 2 goons posted at the lobby desk." The air hummed with exhaust and urgency, the distant wail of a siren underscoring the tension. This was the nexus where corruption's threads converged. Hale's empire built on silenced scandals, wartime ghosts like Sarah reduced to redacted lines. Back at the warehouse, Emily fortified the barriers, crates barricaded the doors. Ryan teaching Sophia basic signals with hand gestures, turning fear into quiet empowerment. The girl practiced, her small hands mimicking the vow's codes, the rabbit propped as sentinel. "Like a secret promise," Ryan said, his paramedic calm soothing her, while Emily monitored a borrowed scanner for chatter. The birthmark peeked from Sophia's sleeve, a talisman now shared, its story unfolding like a map to buried truths. Ethan dismounted, striding into a nearby coffee shop for cover, the bell tinkling like a warning. Through the window, he watched the tower's lobby. Security tight, but Lucas's intel had cracked it. A service elevator accessed via a freight bay. "Moving in," he murmured into the comms. Slipping through an alley, he met Marcus at the rear. The big man's prosthetic hand steady on a toolkit disguised as maintenance gear. They rode the lift in silence, the hum of cables mirroring Ethan's resolve, the scent of stale air and steel grounding him. Sarah's face flashed, her laugh in the tent, the needle's prick as she inked the vow. This was for her, for the child who bore her mark, for the family pieced from roads and regrets. The top floor opened to hushed corridors, carpet muffling their steps. Hale's office door loomed, frosted glass etched with his firm's logo, a shield, ironic in its mockery. Voices leaked through, Hale's smooth timbre, another's gravelly edge. "The girl's a risk, family ties to that old unit mess. Eliminate the trail." Ethan's blood cooled to ice, the promise igniting. No violence here. Evidence first. Marcus planted a discreet recorder, the device whirring softly as they retreated, hearts pounding in sync. Down in the garage, alarms blared suddenly. Hale's team alerted, tires screeching as SUVs mobilized. Ethan gunned his engine, the convoy reforming in a thunder of pipes, leading the pursuit through the city's arteries. Emily's voice broke over the radio. "They're coming." Scanners lit up. The chase wove chaotic, but the vows' bonds held, bikes darting like shadows. In the fray, Ethan glimpsed Hale's sedan veering toward the warehouse district, the endgame rushing forward. Redemption's road twisted sharp, but the mark guided true, loyalty the unbreaking chain against the storm. The chase tore through the city's veins like a storm unleashed, tires screaming against rain-slicked pavement, the wail of sirens blending with the thunderous roar of engines. Ethan's bike led the pack, cutting sharp through the industrial sprawl, the wind whipping salt spray from the bay into his face, stinging like accusations long buried. Hale's sedan surged ahead, a black arrow flanked by two SUVs, their headlights slashing the gathering dusk like predatory eyes. The warehouse district loomed, skeletal cranes silhouetted against the bruised sky, the air thick with the brine of water and the acrid bite of exhaust. This was no random pursuit. It was the promise converging, Sarah's mark pulling the threads taut until they snapped the shadows wide open. Marcus rode tight on Ethan's left, his prosthetic hand gripping the throttle with unyielding precision, while Jonathan and Ryan wove the flanks, blocking escape routes with the seamless coordination of brothers who'd shared foxholes and flat tires alike. The radio crackled in Ethan's ear. Emily's voice edged with steel over the static. "We're barricaded, Sophia's safe. Ryan's signals worked. She knows the drill." The girl's face flashed in Ethan's mind. Wide eyes tracing the birthmark, her small hand in his, forging a bond that transcended blood. That trust fueled him now, a quiet blaze against the corruption Hale embodied. A man who'd traded oaths for ledgers, silencing lives like Sarah's to pad his empire. The sedan swerved into the freight yards, gravel spitting under its tires as it barreled toward the warehouse cluster. Ethan signaled a split, half the vow peeling off to encircle, engines growling low threats without a shot fired. No guns. That was their code, honor over havoc, justice carved from truth. Hale's vehicle skidded to a halt before the safe house's reinforced doors, the man himself bursting out, face twisted in the floodlight's glare, his suits disheveled like shed skin, his goons piled from the SUVs, hands hovering near concealed holsters, but the bikers dismounted in a wall of leather and resolve. Marcus at the fore, his bulk a silent barrier. "End of the line, Hale," Ethan called, voice cutting through the engine echoes like a blade, helmet off now. The birthmark stark on his arm under the yard's sodium lamps. The air hummed with tension, rain resuming in fat drops that pattered on metal roofs, turning the ground to mud. Hale's eyes narrowed, recognition dawning as he scanned the circle, then locked on the mark, a flicker of unease cracking his polish. "You, the drifter from the files. This is about old debts. Walk away, or your little club gets audited into oblivion." Ethan stepped forward, the recorder, tiny, unassuming, clutched in his fist, its contents a ticking bomb of confessions, discrepancies, buried reports, Sarah's query vanishing into Hale's web. Not debts, promises. Sarah Kane, medic, mother-to-be. You erased her, covered the rot in your ops. Supplies siphoned, lives listed as ghosts. And now, her legacy. He nodded toward the warehouse door, where it creaked open just enough for Sophia to peer out, Emily's arm around her, the girl's sleeve hiked to reveal the matching crescent and vine, glowing faintly in the light like a defiant star. Hale's composure fractured, his gaze darting to the child, then back to Ethan, the pieces slamming into place. The mark wasn't myth. It was proof, a family sigil tracing through generations of quiet guardians, nurses, soldiers, souls who'd served without fanfare. Sarah had worn it as armor, inking it on Ethan in that bloodied tent, binding him to watch for her kin. Emily's flight, the threats, they weren't coincidence but a frantic mop-up, Hale's network fearing exposure of wartime graft that still lined pockets in city halls. "That's impossible," Hale snarled, but his voice wavered, the goons shifting uneasily as Jonathan flanked them, Ryan's calm presence a reminder of consequences unspoken. The sirens grew louder, not Hale's allies this time. Lucas's work, anonymous tips routed through veteran channels, badges untouched by bribes converging on the yards. Blue lights painted the scene in strobing pulses, the rain sheeting harder now, blurring edges into a cinematic haze. Hale backed toward his car, hands raised in mock surrender, but Ethan tossed the recorder at his feet, the device's light blinking accusation. Listen to it. All of it. Sarah's echo, your words. The truth doesn't bury easy. The man froze, the weight of decades crashing down, lives unaccounted, families shattered, his shield of silence crumbling under the Mark's unyielding gaze. As uniforms swarmed, cuffing Hale and his crew without resistance, the vow stood sentinel, engines idling like a vow fulfilled. Ethan turned to the warehouse where Sophia rushed out, mud splashing her shoes, throwing her arms around him in a hug that smelled of lavender and rain-soaked hope. Emily followed, tears mixing with the downpour, her hand finding his shoulder. "You kept it," she whispered, the promise alive in her eyes. Sarah's fire undimmed. Inside, the group gathered, coffee brewing amid the steam of drying leathers. Stories exchanged in low tones. Jonathan's scar tale, Ryan's healing hands, Marcus's steadfast grip. This was family chosen, forged in miles and morals. The Iron Vow's crest, a testament to bonds that outlasted storms. Weeks blurred into healing quiet. The city's underbelly exposed in headlines, scrubbed of names but heavy with reckoning. Files unsealed, inquiries launched, Hale's empire fracturing under scrutiny. Ethan visited often, the warehouse traded for a modest apartment on the outskirts, where Sophia's laughter echoed off walls no longer shadowed. She traced the marks on their arms during story time, the rabbit perched nearby, turning trauma into tale. His own son called one evening, voice tentative across the line, the first crack in years of silence. A bridge mending redemption's slow turn, riding out at dawn one morning, the desert wind carrying sage and second chances. Ethan felt the weight lift, Sarah's ghost riding beside him, not as haunt but guardian. The mark remained, a vine of loyalty entwined with crescent promise, whispering that honor wasn't lost but lived. In quiet stands, chosen kin, justice poetic and profound. The road stretched endless, but now it led home, one throttle twist at a time. Thank you for riding along on this journey of promises and unbreakable bonds. If these stories of redemption and heart touch you, please subscribe for more tales from the open road. We'll keep the engines running and the truths flowing.